Not all grief looks the way we expect. When Marie Alessi's husband died suddenly while on a business trip, the life that they had so intentionally built together changed in an instant. But what followed wasn't only sorrow. In this episode, Marie shares how a promise made years earlier became the guiding force in her healing, and how choosing joy doesn't mean denying the pain. Her story challenges the narrative around grief and reminds us that loss and lightness can exist side by side.
And that was my rug underneath the feet moment. I did not see that coming. I did not see that coming. And when you turn back, you see a lot of things that happened, like the nudge moments. But in that moment, it just pulled the rug underneath my feet, and I just slipped into this world of surreal, where it felt like I had come to a standstill and everything around me continued spinning.
I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift, candid conversations about the pivotal moments that have changed lives forever. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Life Shift podcast. I am here with Marie. Hello, Marie.
Hey, Matt.
Thank you for being a part of the Life Shift podcast. Before we even have this conversation, this show comes from my own experience. As a kid, I was 8 years old, and my dad had to sit me down and tell me that my mom had been killed in a motorcycle accident. And at that moment, my parents were divorced. They lived 1,000 miles apart. I was visiting my dad for the summer so that my mom could do her adult things and have a good time as a single. Well, she had a boyfriend, but as a woman that was not married. And he had to sit me down and tell me that. And at that moment that he told me, everything in my life was going to be different. I was
Yes.
going to have to live with a different parent. I was going to have to move to a different state. I was going to have to go to a different school. This was late 80s, early 90s. And for me, the people around me were not talking about how to help a kid grieve, how to be okay, anything. And so I just assumed that I had to show everyone I was fine. And so I became this perfectionist, and behind the scenes, I was a mess, obviously. And
Yeah.
would wonder, do other people have these line in the sand moments? And from one second to the next second, everything about their life is different. And so I've been on this journey now with the Life Shift since 2022, talking to people about the many different pivotal moments in their lives that have shifted them. We have more than one, most of us, but
Yeah.
some of us have really significant ones, whether they're external things that have happened to us or people around us, or there's something that we've manifested on our own. So it's been such a blessing, and I'm so grateful that you want to share your story in your way and have this conversation with me, because we were talking before, the more we share these types of stories, I think the more permission we give to people that are listening to also feel comfortable in their story. So
Yeah.
thanks again.
I couldn't agree more. And first of all, thank you for sharing this story with me. My mama bear heart instantly cracked a little bit when I heard that, because I can only imagine. And I will share my story shortly, but the age is the exact same age that my son was. So,
It's very important, and I think, for so long I didn't talk about it, and I didn't feel comfortable sharing exactly how I felt, and I kind of absorbed the words that the people around me would say, like, she passed away. And I was like, the older I got, I was like, but she didn't. She was, there was a different word that I wanted to use that felt more right and not what other people told me to use. So that's what these conversations do. So it's just a blessing.
I love this. I really, really love this, because I feel that language is so important when we talk about these things, and not try to sugarcoat anything. But there's also that moment where you don't want to shock people. Sometimes you do, actually, but yeah, depends on the situation. But yeah,
And I think of, the people around me, and you've probably witnessed this and probably experienced this as well in your own life. The people around you most of the time are doing the best that they know how to do with the tools that they have. I think that my dad was honestly doing the best he knew how to do, because he was in shock too, and he didn't know how
of
to
course.
go through the world. So
Yeah.
in any case, before we get into your story, maybe you can kind of tell us who Marie is. 2025, how do you show up in the world? How do you identify?
Oh, who Marie is. I feel rather grown up these days. And I also feel like I had to learn the hard way a lot of things in my life. So I feel I'm standing very strong. I stand for a mission that I deeply, deeply believe in, which is bringing more lightness into grief. That's my whole umbrella. That's my whole cape I'm wearing when I step out into the world. And I have a huge heart and a huge mission to bring that to the world and to talk about exactly what you just said. Let's normalize conversations. I'm a speaker, I'm an author, I'm a coach, I'm a TEDx speaker, and first and foremost, I'm a mama bear in shining armor. That's who I am. And yeah, let's start with that.
Well, kudos to you for taking on that honor / responsibility to help other people get language, use the right words, feel the right things. I empathize with you, and I'm sure you have practices, but I'm sure there are moments in which that's really heavy. There's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. And do you have self-care practices in which you don't
Yes.
absorb and do those kind of things to protect yourself?
Yes, 100%. And it's you have no idea how divine the timing is that you're asking me that. The last 2-3 weeks have been rather heavy for me, which is so atypical. I live my life really from a very deliberate and intentional space of lightness and choosing joy and happiness and lightness in my life. And the last 2-3 weeks have been rather heavy for me. And I'm more than happy to talk about this, but my self care practices became so much more important than any other day. I really had to pick myself up and do the whole soothing hot bath, going to the gym, going out to walk in nature. And I did all those things, not just naming them because they sound so cool. I really did those things because I could feel that something was missing. My heart was aching and it was heavier than usual. So we just had my husband's passing anniversary. We get to that story in a minute. And for some reason that I don't even know exactly why, this year felt a lot heavier than others. So I always knew how to prepare for the anniversaries. I teach that stuff. I share that with other people. I walk that journey and that path with other people, how to prepare for an anniversary, and in particular the time after. And this year hit me harder than ever. I can't even tell you why. And it was really, I felt so vulnerable. I felt a lot of loneliness around the time. I felt unsupported. That there were all these things where I'm like, wow, this is interesting. I've created all that for me in my life to feel supported, to not feel lonely. And I had gotten to a point where I actually enjoy being a sole parent, So when both my sons are out partying, staying with other people, whatever, it rarely happens that I have the house to myself. And I had the house all to myself and my cat was gone. I know that might sound weird for some people. It's like, yeah, your cat was gone, whatever. She disappeared for 3 days. She never, ever does that. I was worried sick. I was worried that something might have happened to her. And also she is sort of a real deep connection between Rob and I still. So she stands for a lot, and that she disappeared on my husband's passing anniversary. And then the next day she was still gone and my boys were still, with friends. I felt this deep sense of loneliness, and only afterwards I realized I was supposed to walk through that on my own. There was a particular reason why nobody was around. I believe in divine timing and guidance around that. So yes, absolutely important to use self-love, self-care. I really had to up that and double and triple that the last couple of weeks. And I feel like I'm on the other end, but I still feel the vulnerability of it. I do.
Yeah, I think it's so important. And I think it's beautiful. Someone like you that's deeply immersed in this can share that as well, because I think it breaks down the facade that a lot of us assume other people have, or maybe
Yeah.
experts have. Like they're impenetrable. There's like no breaking them. They're perfect. Like, we're just humans, and sometimes we can't figure things out even if we know the logical answer. For me, a lot of my healing came in those moments in which I was finally comfortable acknowledging when I wasn't okay. And instead of shaming or whatever other emotion I would assume that like I shouldn't be that way, once I was like, it's okay. I'm just a human showing up in this world. And sometimes not everything is sunshine and rainbows. And sometimes that's okay. and that was like a beautiful realization for me,
I,
which
I
sounds so
love that you
simple and
say that.
stupid.
No, no, no. I just had to laugh when I said that, because yesterday when I felt, I've come through that valley that I felt I walked through, I got this massive rainbow outside, and you're just saying sunshine and rainbows, and I literally had that rainbow, and I'm like, oh, thank you. It was like a reward, done it, Marie. Here you go. Here's your rainbow.
Exactly. But you appreciate that part more, right? Like
Very much
when
so.
you've lived through even if it's a small period of like a couple days, and you're like, I know I'm going to get through this, but it's really hard right now. And there's something good about that. And we'll talk more about, we'll get into your story, because I think it's super important. And I think there's probably a lot of those type of moments in both of our lives that we can really relate to. Getting into your story, maybe you can kind of paint the picture of your life leading up to this life shift moment that we're going to talk about, and whatever you need to do to kind of paint the picture of who you were before this happened.
I'm going to do this bullet point form because it's a very, very long story, but I try to keep it short, and then we can, you know, dive deeper. So I grew up in Austria as one of five, and I had this lifelong calling, I want to call it. It was a really deep calling to move to Australia. I never understood it. I could never, pinpoint why or what sparked that for me. I have never seen any documentaries about Australia. I knew nothing about it, but I knew I had to live there. I had to move to the other side and live there. It was a really strong calling. I had this early on. 17 years old, my dad asked me, what do you want for your birthday? I was like, a ticket to Australia. I still remember that. And I actually lived that dream. I followed that calling. I came here first when I was 25, but it took me till almost 32 when I finally moved here. So you can do the maths now. I've been living here for 21 years. And I just, followed my heart by that. And when I arrived in Australia the first time, I had this feeling of coming home. It was this, oh, finally. It was so bizarre. I can't even explain it. And 10 months later, I met Rob. And another 10 months later, we were married. If anyone would have told me that, you're going to move to the other side of the world, you meet the man of your dreams, and you're going to get married, like, no way. If he is Mr. Right, he's still Mr. Right in 3 to 5 years. There's no rushing this. But when Rob proposed 5 months into meeting me, I was like, of course. It was so clear to me. It was so, I had this, everybody talks about when you know, you know. I never knew what people meant by that until I met Rob. I was like, okay. And I never regretted it for a second in my life. So Rob and I were really that couple, the one still madly in love and holding hands when we're walking on the street, 12 years into our marriage, and 2 boys, Flynn and Jet. We had really created our dream life, the house near the beach and the 2 kids, and absolute happiness, deepest happiness. And the most beautiful part about our love story, I find, was that we were so aware of how lucky we were. We were so aware and so deeply living and appreciating that, because I lost my dad when I was 20. And I had no idea how to deal with that when I was 20. It was, nobody teaches you that. We just talk about that. Nobody teaches you how to handle grief.
And no one wants to help you either at that
Yeah.
time.
And it's a taboo topic. It's that, well, let's
It
rather not
was.
talk about it. I did get through it, but what it taught me, and I often talk about this as the hidden gifts in adversity, and one of those hidden gifts in my dad's passing was that I never lived my life from a letting life pass by sort of perspective anymore. I knew how precious life was more than anyone else at my age, or in my circle of friends, I should say. And that was a real gift, because Rob and I lived such a present relationship. We were so present with each other. We were so aware of where we were going, and how much it meant to us. So I love that. I can't remember one single day where I didn't tell Rob how much I loved him in our marriage, and not from a space where I have to tell you because, I might not have you anymore, but I thought my heart's going to burst if I don't tell him, There was so much love for this person, and I love that we had that. It's just something that was very, very precious, and I always feel I had the very similar realization with my dad and with Rob, that I thought in those few years that I had my dad, the 20 years that I had my dad, and the 12 years that I was married to Rob, I know for a fact that I've gotten so much more out of this, as in terms of love and connection, than other people might ever get in their entire life, still having them around, because of the consciousness that we had for our situation, for our gift, for our love.
Were you always that in tune? I mean, it sounds like you were. You had this dream to go to Australia since you were younger. Were you always in tune with like the emotions that you had and holding on to things? I know like when your father passed, that kind of triggers like, oh, time here is precious, but it
Yeah.
sounds like you also had an element of you have to enjoy things.
I
Did you have
love
that
this
growing up?
question. Nobody ever asked me that. I believe I did, and I was probably not as aware of it back then as I am now. So it's like
Makes sense.
becoming aware of that gift, honing those talents, the intuition. I don't know if it is a talent, but to me, I feel intuition has become one of my biggest assets. After Rob died, I double and triple it. It became really intense afterwards, and now I've just learned to trust it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you had it as a kid and like it led you to this
It led
beautiful
me to
life. Like,
Australia,
right. Which then
That's
unfolded
incredible.
into this other
Yeah.
beautiful love story. I mean,
Mm.
it brings on sadness and other things that we'll get to in a second, but there is something to be said. I think there's a lot of people listening, and maybe this is the American cynic in me. There's a lot of people listening that we had dreams as kids, but we were never allowed to really, or we never felt allowed to really dream that be to reality. Like it was always
Yeah.
just, you can dream that, but it's probably not going to happen. And I don't know if people actually told me that, but that was what I assumed from society. But it sounds like that
Interesting.
was never
Wow.
tamped down for you. It was more of like, the world's your oyster, or were people like, you're crazy, why do you want to go there?
I think there was probably a bit of both. I know that my parents sort of wanted, and I'm saying that deliberately, wanted to raise me as you can do anything. But what they showed me didn't reflect that, if that makes sense. So my dad definitely had big dreams, and unfortunately, they didn't come to fruition in a way that he was hoping for. That has given me a few therapy sessions to deal with that, I have to say. So my dad had a really big dream of starting his own business, and he did. And he was amazing at his craft, at what he did. He was a construction engineer, yet he was not great at being a businessman. He trusted the wrong people, lost everything he had, and then eventually died of cancer. So that to me was my learning from when you follow your dream, you're going to die, basically. You know, it took me years and years of therapy to unfold that, but here it is in a nutshell. And that was a really big thing for me because I had so many dreams and I was following my dreams, but there was always this, well, you know, I think some subconscious part of me was always like, if I follow my dream, am I going to die? And then
It makes
you know,
sense.
this whole, and then my husband died, and I'm like, you know, there's a lot going on between conscious and subconscious and following your dream that could probably take thousands of hours to unfold that here, but that is a nutshell. So following my dream wasn't always reflecting safety, if that makes sense. But there was something so strong in my heart that I just had to.
I get that feeling too of kind of associating your father's experience with like, oh, that could happen to me because like my
Mm,
mom died at 32. So my whole life, I thought 32 was my end. I mean, I knew people
yeah.
around me were much
Oh, I
older,
can so relate.
but I didn't plan
Yeah.
for life after 32 because I just figured that's also my fate. I would never get on a motorcycle. I would never do all the things. She was just kind of finding herself. Like this was her period of like really being born as an adult. Like she
Coming
was
into
really
yourself.
finding
Yeah.
herself. And so you just helped me unlock that piece of like, I saw her living her best life and then it ended. And that's probably what I
Oh,
assumed for so long.
yeah.
So thank you for that.
Yeah. You're very welcome, and thank you. This is more like a therapy session here. We're both going to walk out like, whoa. Thank you. It's interesting because when you said that, the 32, I remember when I turned 47, I had this wow moment. I made it. It was a really intense birthday for me because my husband was 45 when he passed, and my dad was 46 when he passed. So when I turned 47, I felt like I made it. It's so bizarre. And when I turned 50, everything inside of me was going like, oh, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. And it was interesting because a couple of days prior, I unlocked what that was because I was entering a decade that they never made it to. And I literally felt that if I passed that line of turning 50, then there is a disconnection from them. And that took me a lot of time to actually unfold that, because I could feel like moving up to my birthday. And I'm like, what is going on? I never worried about turning 30. I never worried about turning 40. I'm like, is that an age thing? Because now it's like the sort of midlife thing. And I didn't feel any of that. And then I had it. I was like, oh my God, it's because I'm entering a decade without them. It's just so weird, But yeah.
I don't know. That's what I love about these conversations, because we're not the only people that have ever thought these things. But
Yeah.
now we're kind of like taking the weirdness or the shame that some of us like feel. And so the more that we say the things out loud that we may have assumed were weird, or
Yeah.
it's like they're not. Everyone's feeling these things. So thank you for that. I think it's
No, thank
just
you.
important. So beautiful love story. You follow your dream. You find bliss, essentially. It sounds like you find this relationship in which is kind of indescribable. It's like this
My knight
Hallmark.
in shining armor.
Right. It's like a Hallmark movie, but like real
Yeah.
life. So how does this unfold to bring you to this version? Because I mean, know your life shift moment. We talked about it, but what is the moment that really changed you?
So in my life shift moment, I'm going to take you to a day in 2018, June 2018. Rob had to fly to Perth, which is on the other side of Australia. It's like a 3.5 hour flight away. We walked him to the station because we live like 200 meters from the train station, and Rob would often catch the train to the airport because it's so much easier not to have to worry about city traffic, parking, etc. So we walked hand in hand, Flynn and Jet on their bike, on their scooter, walking down to the station. And it was such a bizarre moment, because those moments where there's a nudge, but you can't really, it's such a gentle nudge, you don't want to pay attention to it, and you're like, weird. So a couple of weird things that happened that day. First of all, we were waiting for the train, and I remember having this nudge, take a photo of them. I'm like, I take a lot of photos, so I didn't pay a lot of attention to it. I just said, hey, took a couple of pictures, and then the train came, and I kissed Rob goodbye, and I took a picture of the train leaving. And as I'm taking a picture of the train leaving, I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this for? This is weird. And those pictures that I took that day of the boys with Rob and the train leaving was the exact pictures I used to tell the world about Rob's passing. So he flew to Perth, and the next day he was working, and we had a conversation over the phone that night. And he told me about this couple he met over dinner. They were lining up for dinner. They started to chat, and then when it came to getting a table, they were like, "Oh, are you here alone? Do you want to sit with us?" He said, "No." He said, "Babe, I was so tired, but they were so persistent. They wanted me to sit with them, so I did." He said, "I told them about the love languages and about this and that. I think I've given them a lot for their young relationship." And the guy was from the same little town in Treviso, near Treviso, in Italy, where his dad is from. Rob's dad is from near Treviso in Italy, and she was from Perth, Australia. And it was so beautiful because that was our final conversation, and it was about love and connection. And the next day, he was supposed to ring me, and the phone didn't ring. And I kept calling all day, and I was worried sick about him because my anxiety levels were rising, and I'm like, what's going on? There was something going on, and I couldn't put my finger to it. I wasn't sure what was going on, but in your mind you come up with all these excuses. Maybe he left the phone in a hotel, maybe he left it in the taxi like he did on our wedding night. He lost his phone in a taxi, all these things coming up, and you find more and more excuses, but you also feel that there's something not right. There are a whole lot more details to that day, but I eventually got the phone call at 4 p.m. in the afternoon. This guy introduced himself as a sergeant from a coroner's office, and that was my biggest bilingual brain moment I ever had, because growing up in Austria, my mother tongue is German. I had never heard the word coroners before. So I'm still on the phone going like, yeah, like completely oblivious to who he actually is, because coroners didn't mean anything to me, but I learned quite fast. And the next sentence that came was, "I'm sorry to inform you that your husband deceased in a hotel room in Perth this morning." And that was my rug underneath the feet moment. I did not see that coming. I did not see that coming. And when you turn back, you see a lot of things that happened, like the nudge moments, but in that moment, it just pulled the rug underneath my feet, and I just slipped into this world of surreal, where it felt like I had come to a standstill and everything around me continued spinning. That's the sort of moment. Yeah.
Really, I'm sorry that you had to receive that call, because I can't imagine what it's like to have essentially this dream life that you've created, that you were part of, that you lived and breathed like in the most intentional ways, be like instantly taken from you. And I could
Yeah.
see how that would, for a lot of people, and I don't know if it happened to you, but like destroy a human. Just like, I don't know, I feel like I could be wrecked in that moment. Do you recall how you, because you said it felt like very surreal, do you recall how you moved through the world in the next couple minutes after
Yeah.
that?
It was very, very surreal. That's the only word I can use to describe that. And I feel very lucky, actually. I've never thought about that, but just when you said that, I felt massive amount of gratitude in my heart that I never felt destroyed. Never. Something really interesting happened, and it didn't come to me straight away, but there is a moment that I really deeply want to share, because it happened about 3 years prior to this moment. And Rob called me on the way home from work, and he said, "Babe, I'm going to be 2 hours late. There was an accident on Heathcote Road." And for those who don't know, Heathcote Road is like one really, really long road through the entire national park, and that was his way home from work. And if there is an accident, then the detour was like 2 hours, and that's what happened that day. And we learned later on that a young dad has lost his life in a front on collision with a truck. His daughter was only 16 months old. And because our boys were so little at the time, so they would have been 5 and 7, it really hit home for us. So it triggered us to have that conversation, the what if. What would you do if something was to happen to me? And this conversation, in a nutshell, it was a long conversation, lots of tears, lots of love, lots of deep, deep connection when we talked through this. The conversation ended in, if something was to ever happen to me, I would want you to create the happiest life possible for you and the boys. And that's what love is, right? You just want the other person to be happy, if you're there or not. It's you want love for that person, you want happiness for that person. And I remember how deeply I wanted that for Rob. I said, if something was ever to happen to me, I said, I love you so much. I cannot imagine you being alone for the rest of your life. You're such a beautiful person. I would want you to find someone. I would want the boys to have a female influence in their life, that who they can trust. But in a nutshell, it was theory, right? It's not that we didn't mean it, but you always think it doesn't happen to you until it does. So when I walked through this most surreal moment in my entire life, and I had the boys sitting in the living room, they were dressed in their martial arts uniform. They were ready for me to take them to Hapkido training, and they were on their iPads, because that's what I did in that moment. I was like, I just have to make one more phone call. I knew already something was not right, but I didn't want to worry them. So as you do, they were sitting on their iPads waiting. And I walked downstairs and I looked at them and I said, "Can you put your iPads down?" And the way I said it, there was no discussion. You know how kids always discuss one more round, one more this. They just looked at me, put their iPads away. And I said, "This is the hardest thing I'll ever have to tell you in my entire life. And your dad just died." It was literally, I can't remember the exact words that I used because this is a bit blurry to me, but it was, there is no sugarcoating a message like your dad just died. You have to say it straight out. And what followed was, it was definitely the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my entire life. It really was. Just watching them fall apart and crying and screaming, and I hugged them, I held them, I cried with them, and gave them all the time they needed.
Did you feel like you had to be strong for them or anything, or did you feel like you were allowed to feel all the things as well?
The strongest thing I remember from that moment, because a lot of that is really blurry, what I felt, what I thought, I know that what I heard in my head was Rob's voice saying, I want you to create the happiest life possible for the boys and you. That's what I heard. Our conversation from 3 years prior. And I was like, wow, okay. And then the question started from the boys. And, I remember my older son saying, who's going to look after us now, Mum? And I said, I will. I will look after you. I remember saying that twice because it was so important. I don't know if it was more important for him or me to hear me say that, but I think we all needed to hear it. And then my little one looked at me, and that really broke me. I still remember that very vividly. He said, I'm only 8 and I'm not going to have a daddy anymore. That was really heartbreaking because they were both really, really close to Rob. They were both such daddy boys, and yeah, hearing him say that was intense. But from that moment onwards, I knew that that was a promise I made Rob, and that it was really important for all four of us to keep that promise, to go forward and create the happiest life I possibly can. I had no freaking idea how to do that in that very moment. Absolutely just drawing blanks, but I knew this is where I'm going. It became my North Star in my darkest hour.
Did you feel this is this is just not an appropriate question, but did you feel a lot of pressure? Like there's a lot of crap going on right now. I'm really sad. There's a lot of, like my life has just been shifted and now I have this responsibility to create the happiest of lives and this is the hardest of times for me. I feel like that would be a lot of pressure. Did you feel any inkling of that? Like, damn it.
That's really interesting. No, it's
Cuz I just
really
want to be
interesting that
sad.
you say that. Yeah, I felt a lot of guidance through that. Interestingly
You're a better
enough,
human than me.
no, not at all. I just felt very
It has to be
connected.
from the relationship that you created and this beauty.
A lot of people ask me that, and a lot of people say like, "Oh, you must have been asking yourself the question why all the time," and I never once asked myself why. But I remember a moment very vividly, and it was only a few weeks after Rob died. And I was upstairs in our bedroom, the very same room where I received the phone call. And all of a sudden, I had this, what I now call a spiritual epiphany, where I deeply felt Rob and I have chosen this. On a soul level, this is what we have chosen. This is our soul contract. And that gave me so much purpose, I want to say, and acceptance and love, to love a person so deeply, to choose that as your path together is incredible. And I'm saying that from both sides. Because I only ever looked at Rob thinking, oh my goodness, I cannot believe that you have chosen this for me to do what I do today. Until a friend of mine who's also deeply spiritual, she said to me, I think what you've chosen there is probably, I don't even want to say it. She said the harder part, and I didn't want to own that at first. But she said, you're the one who was, staying here and looking after the boys. And I'm like, I never saw it as such. Yet there is a lot to that, and I certainly had my moments, don't get me wrong. I'm definitely far from superhuman. But mostly I saw it as a massive privilege that I have been chosen to look after these boys and not as a burden or anything. There are moments where you go through where you feel like, God damn it, I just need somebody to share this with, or I need somebody to help me through this or bounce this off with. I had one of those moments last night, believe it or not, where I really deeply felt the absence of him, where I'm like, I have no idea how to get through this. There was something coming up between the boys that I didn't see coming that blindsided me. And I was left with such deep sadness about it. And then I woke up and was like, it wasn't as big as you felt it last night. You know what I mean? But yesterday it felt deep, it felt big, and I cried about it. And I felt this was a moment where I certainly would have loved to have Rob by my side to talk that through with. And I sat with the idea was like, who could I even talk to about this? I've got some friends that I trust deeply with things like that, but some of them are not parents, and I didn't expect them to be able to understand that.
Did the experience, this is going to come from my own personal experience, but did the experience of like losing your father and not knowing what the heck to do grief wise and like how to move through it in a way that feels productive or helpful or beautiful or whatever word we want to assign with it, did that experience of losing your father and what came after help you, hurt you? Like how did it impact the way that you grieved your husband?
Massively. I would say it played a huge role. And again, when you look back, all of a sudden you see all these milestones that brought you to the very moment that you're in. It is, people often say, oh, I wasn't prepared for that. I sometimes use that. But then when you look back and like, oh, God damn it, I was so prepared for that, like these were all these moments that prepared me to deal with that right now. And my husband's passing was so different for me to deal with compared to my dad's passing. Because when my dad died, I was 20. He had cancer. And you sometimes say, oh, at least you had time to prepare for that. Not really, because he was cancer free for about a year. And then when he came back, it took him within a month. It was so aggressive. So it literally went from 12th of August to the 20th of September and he was gone. And I was like, wow, okay. So I didn't feel like, oh, you saw it coming and you could have all these conversations, the life-changing, deep conversations. It's not like that. People always think it's like that, but it's more often than not, it's not like that.
My thought is I was able to do all the things that you say that most people can't with a cancer diagnosis with my grandmother when I was in my
Wow.
30s. And I
Yeah.
think it's because I had the experience of a sudden loss
See?
first,
Yeah.
because I knew all the things I couldn't do. So that's why the question came from like, how does one grief experience impact the other? Because for me, I hate saying it, but like there's this weird silver lining of the horrible grief experience I had after my mom died,
Yeah.
because it gave me something so like indescribably beautiful for my grandmother's end. So
I love this so
that's where
much.
that
I
question
love
comes
this.
from.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that.
I mean, it makes me wonder, does a sudden death impact you to deal with a longer term versus the other way? Does a longer term prepare, or do they not?
I see what you mean, because you had it the other way around. You had the sudden death first, and then that. So that certainly gave you the dealing. I did not have that moment, unfortunately. So, but again, I call this a hidden gift and adversity. What a gift that you have that with your grandmother. That's incredible. And
No regrets.
yeah, and that's exactly it. What my dad's passing taught me was to live my life with no regrets.
Yeah.
That's the exact thing. And that to me felt like the biggest gift. And I have often said this, in hindsight, I feel that my dad's passing gave me the biggest gift in my relationship with my husband. So to me, that was always like that wedding gift that I got from my dad. This is how I lived my life in such a conscious and present way with my husband. And we certainly had our moments where we weren't as present as we wanted to be, but the overall arching feel to our relationship was very present, very together, very connected. And we lived this beautiful life with each other, not next to each other. People always say, oh, yeah, but everybody fights. I can't remember one single fight with Rob in 12 years. We had probably disagreements or,
Like
things that we
humans.
like, but yeah, but never a fight, never a yelling competition, never any of that. I remember like 2 or 3 times where it just stormed out the house because I needed a moment of silence to collect myself. And then I came back and we hugged and everything was fine, but there were 2 or 3 moments in like 12 years. So I didn't have that, what a lot of people say. And I feel very blessed that we didn't have that.
Did you have the experience, or would you say that the love, the relationship, the type of bond that you had with your husband Would you say there were very few things left unsaid when he
Yeah.
left?
100%. That's the exact thing what I meant before. The life with no regrets. That we lived that already. I had said and done everything every single day that I wanted to say or do with Rob, and there are a lot of people who are left behind with this I wish I had, or I wish I hadn't, or I should have said, or I should have done. I didn't have any of that. None. And yes, you always wish for more time. No matter what, no matter how old people are, you always wish for more time, no questions asked. But the time that I did have with Rob, I have no regrets. I have no regrets. It is a really beautiful space to be in.
Yeah, it sounds like unreal and so beautiful, like in the sense of like how lucky, knowing full well that we all have the capacity to do that, but we don't. There's so many of us that just leave the things unsaid, and we wait for a trigger of some sort that brings us to be like, oh crap, I have to say everything now because the time is limited. When really, like, what if we were like you and Rob and like just saying it all the time? Like, how fulfilled would we feel versus like keeping it inside? So
Absolutely.
part of me is like, it kind of makes, I understand the surreal part. There's definitely grief. There's definitely sadness. There's definitely missing him. But there's also, I can understand how there could be an opportunity for you to move forward and find the happy version of life
Yeah.
after.
Yeah, absolutely. I did. I felt very, very guided and looked after from the get-go, and I can't even put this into words. There were so many little moments, and I'm not just talking about the feathers and dragonflies and butterflies and all that stuff that happened as well, but there was a very bizarre way how I felt that Rob started communicating with me through numbers. And I know that sounds very airy fairy. It's not even like that. For about 5-6 weeks after Rob died, I woke up at 1:26 a.m. every single morning. Every morning. And I found it quite annoying because 1:26 a.m. is not a time where you want to be awake, especially when you're a sole parent and you're dealing with deep emotions and you need your sleep more than anything. And every single night, 1:26 a.m., it was never a minute before or after. I'm like, what on earth is it with that number? Like, at first you don't pay attention to it, but then when it's every night, you start going like, that's odd. So, and I've always been a numbers person, so that's probably why I believe he chose to communicate like that, because I eventually put it on Facebook, as you do. I'm like, does anybody know what these numbers mean? I've Googled it, the angel numbers, 126, whatever, it stands for big new beginning. I'm like, duh, my husband died. Yeah, but I didn't feel that was the answer. I'm like, there's something to that number. And then a friend from town reached out to me and she said, Marie, 126, don't you see it? And I'm like, no, what is it? Tell me. And she said, it's the 12th of June. 126, the 12th of June. It's the day that Rob died. And I'm like, oh my God, how could I have not seen it? And I know you're in America, you turn it around, but here in Australia we don't. So it's 12/6 is the 12th of June. That day, I just I just couldn't believe that I didn't see it before, and I went to bed and I woke up at 12:06 that night. And I looked at the alarm clock and I remember thinking, ha ha, very funny. I get it now. It was almost like, do you get it? It wasn't 126, it was 12:06. I'm like, I get it now. Thank you. Very funny. And from that moment onwards, and it is still ongoing now, there is hardly a time where I don't see the number 126 somewhere. And I'm not just talking on the clock. We traveled around the world after Rob died for 2 months, and we were in Vienna underground or at airports, whatever. There were places, and there was always the number 126 written on a little door, on a little, like everywhere. And it's not such a common number, 126, but it was everywhere. I just could not believe how often we saw it, or the number 12, 12 or 6, but 126 was very often. We stayed in the Maldives. That was our first stop when we traveled around the world. And, they drive you around in this little golf buggy, show you the island where everything is. And then we drove to our beautiful overwater bungalow that we stayed in. And then she stops in front of our door and we all looked at each other and we just started laughing. it was the number 12 that we got, of course. It was like, of course, what else do we get? It was just ongoing all the time, and it's still going now. So I'm like, yeah, I feel I'm always guided. I get moments like that when I have to make decisions, and it's always very, very clear. I questioned it a lot at first, and now it's just such a normal thing. I'm like, yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks.
I get the number thing
Yeah.
too.
Oh, awesome.
I have something that I think, but I see the same number all the time. So I think it's somebody. I think it's, I don't know. I'm not too woo woo in that way, but I
Yeah. For
recognize
me,
it and
it's
I
so
see
normal
it.
now.
Yeah. No, I get it.
I
Was
love that.
I think as part of a grief journey, I think when people talk about grief, the people I talk about grief, and they talk about it in a very like negative sense, or like a very like, this is a very dark, horrible period of time, which I think on the surface it is. Do you see it as such, or do you see it as a different kind of transformative type journey? It feels like you would have a different definition of that.
Yeah. I look at grief very, very differently. First of all, I find it very, very sad that grief has become such a taboo topic. Not become, always has been, sorry. It's always been such a taboo topic, and I feel we need to talk about these things way more openly, because when I started talking about my different experience and how I feel about it, it took a lot of courage to stand up for it, because I knew that people looked at it differently. I knew that people would judge me for being too happy or whatever, but that was my promise to my husband. So stay out of it. If you don't know
Right.
anything about it, stay out of it. That was like, that's how I felt. And I was quite clear, mostly with my boundaries around that. That's also like, it is a bit of a plug, but I'm just going to say it here. That was also the reason why I did my TEDx talk, and the TEDx talk is redefining our image of a widow, because I just really wanted to talk about this. There are so many labels. So now you're a widow, and I know I'm wearing black today, and I hardly do, but I'm wearing black today because I'm going to a very, very traditional funeral literally after this. That's why I'm already dressed in black. But it's not my usual go-to. I love wearing colors. I'm very much known for wearing a lot of orange, like orange shoes and orange handbags and orange everything. I love colorful things. So I'm not your typical widow. When you look at me, I don't feel like a typical widow, and I'm quite open to talk about that. For me, grief is not something that stays with you forever. Everyone in society around me has that very old-fashioned belief in grief will stay with you forever. Grief lasts forever. Grief is love that has nowhere to go. All that stuff where I'm like, I can't hear it anymore. I really, I don't agree with it. So the way that I look at grief, and I really put that disclaimer out there, this is my very personal belief, and you can take it or leave it. I would love for you to try it on and see it how it fits you. I look at grief like a visitor. It's not a permanent resident in my house anymore. When grief came, she was here so often that she thought that she lived here, and she acted like she lived here. We had such intimate moments that we were sitting in the bathtub together sobbing, and she slept with me every single night. And there was a time where I thought, you know what? You've overstayed your welcome. You need to go. And it was a sort of half conscious, half subconscious decision. But there was this moment where I'm like, it's time for you to go. I made this promise, and Joy, on the other hand, she's allowed to move in here permanently. So there was this transition where I bid her farewell, and she still comes every now and then. She knocks on the door, and if I have time, I allow her in. I sit with her. Sometimes we cry, sometimes we laugh, we share stories, and sometimes the three of us sit together, Joy, Grief, and I. And it was literally, that is the sort of perspective that I have on grief. Yeah, she comes and visits. Absolutely. She comes less and less often these days. That's what happens when you don't really pay a lot of attention to a friend. And I'm quite okay with that, because her and I are not that aligned anymore. We had a lot in common, but we've grown apart, and that's okay. That's exactly how I look at it. She's like a friend that I've grown apart from. And when she comes in, I'm more than happy to share some stories with her and some memories with her. But that's it. She's not moving in here anymore. I'm done with that. And I love that Joy lives here permanently. And she's not always here. She sometimes goes to the markets, and then I really miss her. But that's the sort of thing, how I look at it, and it suits me really well. And it's also something that I wanted to teach my boys. They were 10 and 8 when they lost their dad. Do you think I want them to sit in grief forever? No. They sat with grief for a really, really long time. It was very intense for them, for both of them, in very different levels, very different. They dealt with it so differently. And I could see that last night when we had this situation where I literally had to say to them, you know what? One day you'll be your only family. I need you to sort this out now. You need to talk about this. This is ridiculous. I felt that it needed to be said, and it's probably confronting. And I'm not using things like that very often. I'm like, oh, one day I'm going to die, but we do talk about death and the reality of it very openly. We don't talk about it every single day, but I got the question straightforward from Flynn, my older son, when he was 11. So about 9 months after his dad passed, he said, what would happen to us if you die, Mum? you know you get those questions from kids. They're very straightforward, they don't shy away from the truth and from direct questions, and I loved it. I was so grateful he asked me that.
Yeah. Well, they don't shy away if you keep the door open or you're willing to talk about it. I think, my experience, I love that you said that like grief is not forever, and you were kind of poo-pooing on some of the things that people say, because I say that I had a terrible grief experience losing my mom because I stuffed it down for so long because no one was prepared to help me, and I wasn't prepared to help me, and the
Well, you don't know how to
grief
when
was in
you're
the
a kid.
hallway and like just stayed there. And in my 30s, I say, and people get mad at me that I say this, but I closed the door on grief. And so thinking of it as a person, because I was given the tools to really understand what I was holding on to. And really what I was holding on to
I
was
love
that
this.
since my mom died, every decision that I had made since was out of this fear that someone else was also going to leave. And like when my therapist kind of helped me uncover this, like it was like one of those clouds part moment, and you just like first you
Mm-hmm.
grieve all the things you should have
Oh,
done.
yeah.
Exactly. But then you're also like, man, had I known, had I figured this out earlier, what would I have done? But after those moments and kind of unpacking and piecing together my life after that, I was like, yeah, like I'm not sad. And that's kind of what I equated grief with, was like the sad depression, because that's what I had experienced for so long. But I wasn't that way anymore. And it just gave me this gift that when my grandmother was diagnosed, my grandmother took over the mom role. Basically, she became
Mm,
my best friend, and I would talk to her about everything. And she got sick, and I was like, oh shit, what do I do? And so I just leaned in. I was like, this is all the time we have. So this is what we
wow.
need to
Oh,
do.
that just gave me full on
It was it
goosebumps.
was so important, and
Oh.
it was kind of like how you described your relationship with your husband. It was like at the end, she wasn't super into sharing the hard things. She was really into sharing love, and that part was big. But at the end, it was like 2 months before she died, and it was right around her birthday, and I was like, I had this nudge in me, and had I not experienced what I did after losing my mom, I wouldn't have done it. But I said, we're sitting down right now, just the two of us, and we're telling each other everything that we've ever wanted to say to each other. And when I left her apartment that night, it was this feeling of like, there's nothing left unsaid. So if and when she passes,
Yeah,
I will be okay.
I
And I
love
spent,
that.
a couple months later, I spent the last 5 days of her life with her in the hospice room, waiting for the last breath. But like all of that was a beautiful, hard experience, but I wouldn't have had that or done that, I don't think, had I not had
Yeah.
such a terrible
Yes.
grief
Yes.
journey for 20 years, 20 plus years.
100%.
So we look at these moments and we're just like, they suck, but also like, what have they taught us in a
Yeah.
good way?
The hidden gifts.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to hear your story, and this is going to sound so bad and feel sad because of the way that you talk about it.
Mm.
It's a very tragic and very sad experience when we say it, but the way that you describe it and what lives on, even though Rob is not here, like what lives, it feels different to me. And I don't know if you feel that or you do that on purpose, but, or if other people say that to you, but like your story, the way you say that you like live happiness, like you feel it, even the way you tell the hard parts.
Mm. It's Rob's love legacy that we're living, and it's also it's our legacy, you know. And I love that we have created this. I really see it that way. We have created this from a soul level. We have chosen that long before I understood that on a human level, you know. But it was such a gift when I understood it. And at first, like I'm sitting here talking about it completely normal now because it is normal to me now. But 7 years ago, when I had this epiphany, nothing was normal about it. There was just this, I was grateful for it. It was almost a bit daunting. I'm like, there's no way I could ever say that to anyone. They're gonna think I'm completely nuts when I tell them, well, Rob and I have chosen this. You know, I was sharing that with you before we went live, and I'm gonna say it now. I recorded a summit where I shared that moment, and I thought, oh, hold on. No, I can't share this moment without having the whole story and the whole, you know, unpacking this. I can't just say to somebody, "Oh, you've chosen that on a spiritual level." And as I was recording this, and I'm hearing myself saying it, and this sounds wrong, this is too straightforward. I need people to understand the whole background. My whole screen went blank while I'm recording. I'm like, I was not supposed to say it that way. It needs more preparation. So that those moments, you know, the moments where I'm like, I'm still looked after all the time. I feel so guided through that moment. Yeah.
Those reminders are really pretty.
Yeah.
I don't know why I said pretty, but they're beautiful as
They
well.
are.
Uh,
Yeah.
I'm sure you've done this and maybe you think it's a little silly, but do you ever think about what this version 2025 Marie would say to the Marie that hung up the phone but had to go talk to your kids? Like, is there anything that you would want to tell her about the journey that was coming next?
Mm. Yeah, I probably would. I would want to say, you've got this. Literally, that you've got this. You'll be guided through this. You're not ever going to be alone through this. And I, I got this message from Rob very, very clearly shortly after he died that he'll be there with me. He'll be literally opening all the doors for me, and I always felt he did. I always felt that he was guiding us all the way. Even those moments where I felt so alone in parenting decisions or whatever, there were a couple of really, really big moments where I felt, damn, I wish Rob was here and I could talk to him about this. But I also know that he always was. And me coming to a decision was him being there with me, guiding me, or even just when you don't want to see it from such a woo woo perspective, the things that living my life with him have instilled in me, the values that we shared, the connections that we formed, are still here. You know, that's nothing that will ever go away. And that has guided me to become the best solo parent that I could be for our boys. Took me a long time to own that. I constantly felt like I'm not a good provider, I'm not this, I'm not that. And then I had this moment of, I'm a freaking great provider, you know. Like, it's just, I thought of it from a money perspective, and then I'm like, oh well, there's so much more than money. There's, you know, emotions, there's love, there's guiding them to become who they are now. And I'm looking at them, I'm thinking they are freaking amazing young adults. I'm so proud of them. And
Yeah,
well, who raised them? Oh, hold on, that was me. You know, I own this now, but oh my God, I've made lots of mistakes as well. No questions asked. I feel I became a better parent when I stopped trying to be a perfectionist or the perfect parent. That's when I became a better parent,
that makes sense.
because the expectation that you put on young boys when you constantly try to be perfect, oh my God, I don't want to live with that burden, you know? So,
I mean, I think of your boys too right now and how blessed they are to have a parent that is guiding them through this
mm,
in whatever imperfect way that you want to do, you know, like that feels most heart centered and most aligned with the life that you created with your
yeah,
husband. I think they're just, I can't imagine the lasting impact and the ripple effect that that has, you know, like of what they've learned in this journey, watching you go through your own journey, but also guiding them through theirs, because it is tough. 8 years old, 10 years old, that's, I know firsthand what that's like. And so not having
yeah,
someone that was able to guide me through, I know what that's like. And so I think
yeah,
of your boys and how lucky they are, whether they want to admit it or not at this stage in their life, how lucky
They
they are to
actually
have that.
do, which is
Good.
so beautiful.
That's
They really
beautiful.
do. Yeah, it's amazing. Mm.
If someone was listening to the story and something that you said resonated with them, or they want to tell you part of their story because it just aligned or woke something up or gave them
Mhm.
permission, what's the best way to find you, connect with you, learn what you offer the world?
Mm. I think my website is definitely the best contact point. It's mariealessi.com. And you can find in anything and everything I do. You know, I offer coaching and courses, and there's a retreat coming up in Bali. I have to plug this here in March 2026, which I'm really, really looking forward to. So there is a lot out there how you can connect with me or receive help or even just get one of my books. I share my story in my books, and I also share very practical steps of moving through grief. In particular, and again, I know I'm plugging here shamelessly, my book Happy Healing has got my 7 steps from grief to relief that I personally used after Rob died, how to walk through that and how to come through on the other end. And there's a button where you can just connect with me personally, reach out, book a chat with me, and share what you've got to share. Maybe you want to speak on my podcast as well. I interview people about their life story, about how they came through grief. So if you have a story where you came through grief, come and chat to me. I'd love to hear it. It's
Awesome.
beautiful.
Well,
Yeah.
I want to thank you for being a part of my healing journey and allowing me to share parts of my story and hear your story. And I really do feel strongly that the more we hear other people's stories and share our own, the better off we are, like just as humans. So thank you for just coming on
Yeah.
this ride and this journey with me.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. I feel it was such a, yeah, giving and receiving for both of us. Thank you.
No problem. I'm just honored to hold this space. I do encourage anyone listening, if something that Marie said resonate with you, please reach out to her. Another gift would be beautiful if you know someone in your life that might need to hear this conversation. If you share this episode with them, that would just, I think that would be a wonderful gift for both of us. So thank you for listening. Thank you, Marie, for being a part of this journey. I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. And I will be back next week with a brand new episode. Thanks again, Marie.
Thank you.
For more information, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com.